Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I'm Agni Oktaviani Saputri, and my friends is Dewi Purnamasari and Ekha Shobichatus Solekhah. We will present the result of the midterm exam assignment for the Poetry and Drama in Language Education course by Utut Kurniati. This presentation about analysis of the novel entitled Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Let's start right away. The first speaker is Ekha Shobichatus Solekhah.
Okay, introduction. Jane Austen was born in 1775 at Stephenton, Hampshire in southern England. Where her father was a minister, she was the sixth child in a family of seven children. Jane Austen began writing at a young age. About Pride and Prejudice is an 1813 romantic novel by Jane Austen. It cards the emotional development of the protagonist Elizabeth Bennet, who learns the error of making hasty judgment and comes to appreciate the difference between the superficial and the essential. The comedy of the writing lies in the depiction of manners, education, marriage, and money during the Regency era in Britain. The novel revolves around the importance of marrying of love, not simply for money, despite the social pressure to make a good wealthy match. Next slide. Character analysis. Elizabeth Bennet, an intelligent and spirited young woman who possessed a keen wit and enjoys studying people's character. Fitzwilliam Darcy, a wealthy, proud man who falls in love with Elizabeth and repels a generous, thoughtful nature beneath his somewhat stiff demeanor. Mr. Bennet, Elizabeth ironic and often apathic father. Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth foolish and unrestrained mother who is obsessed with finding husband for her daughters. Janet Bennet, a gentle and kind-hearted young woman who is Elizabeth confident and the oldest of the Bennet daughters. Mary Bennet, the pretentious three Bennet daughters who prefers reading over socializing. Catherine Bennet, the Bennet's fifth C, 40 daughters, who joins her sister Lydia in flirting with the soldiers. Lydia Bennet, the Bennet immature and irresponsible youngest daughter. Carles Bingley, a good-natured and wealthy man who falls in love with Jane. Caroline Bingley, Bingley's shallow and haughty sister, who best friend Jane and later snubbed her. Mr. and Mrs. Hurst, Bingley's snobbish sister and brother-in-law. George Wickham, a handsome and personable fortune hunter to whom Elizabeth is innately attracted. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Darcy's around aunt, who dominated Mrs. Collins and entertains hopes that their daughters will marry Darcy. Miss the Bold, Lady Catherine's sickly late daughters, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Darcy, well-mannered and a pleasant cousin, who is interested in Elizabeth, but who needs to marry someone with money. Next slide. Georgia Darcy, Darcy's shy but warm-hearted sister. Mr. Collins, Mr. Bennet's ridiculous cousin, who will inherit Lowborough after Mr. Bennet's death. Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's sensible and intelligent friends, who disappoints Elizabeth by marrying Mr. Collins for money and security. Sir William and Lady Lucas, Carlotta's parents and the Bennet neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, Mrs. Bennet, intelligent and cultivated brother and sister-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, a country attorney and his vulgar wife, who is Mrs. Bennet's sister.
Okay, thank you, Ekha. The next speaker is Dewi.
Setting: the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is set in Regency England, and the plot develops over the course of almost 2 years. The Regency era is generally considered to refer to the period 1811 to 1820. Time setting is approximately contemporary with the time of publication, as the novel was published in 1813. Next slide. The themes of this novel is family, wealth, reputation, social class, and of course, pride and prejudice. Next slide. Summary. The arrival of the wealthy Mr. Bingley to the Netherfield Park estate caused an uproar in the nearby village of Longbourn. In the Bennet household, Mrs. Bennet is eager to marry Bingley to one of his 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. When Bingley meets Jane at a party, he seems to fall in love with her immediately, but Bingley's cocky friend, Darcy, is rude to Elizabeth. When Jane gets caught in the rain while traveling to visit Bingley, she becomes ill and has to stay in Netherfield. Elizabeth comes to Netherfield to care for Jane, and although Bingley's sister is rude and condescending to her, Darcy's attraction to her deepens. Elizabeth, however, continued to find him arrogant. Meanwhile, Mr. Collins, a proud clergyman, and Mr. Bennet's cousin and heir visit the Bennets in search of a marriageable daughter. Around the same time, the Bennets also meet Wickham, an army officer whom Elizabeth finds charming, and who claims Darcy wronged her in the past. Elizabeth's prejudice against Darcy hardens. Soon afterwards, at a ball in Netherfield, Mrs. Bennet, much to Darcy's annoyance, comments that a marriage between Jane and Bingley is likely imminent. Collins, meanwhile, proposes to Elizabeth, who refuses, inviting her mother. But pleasing her father, Collins then proposed to Elizabeth's friend Charlotte Lucas, who seek out of a desire for security rather than a need for love. Bingley unexpectedly leaves for London on business, and Caroline informs Jane in a letter that not only will they not be returning, but moreover, her brother plans to marry Georgina, Darcy's sister. Jane is devastated. Elizabeth believes Darcy and Caroline are deliberately separating Bingley and Jane. The sisters' aunt and uncle, Mr. Gardiner and Mrs. Gardiner, invite Jane to London, hoping she will forget her disappointment. But upon her arrival, Caroline insults her and secretly letting herself fall in love with Bingley. Elizabeth visits Charlotte and Mr. Collins, where she meets Collins' veteran and Darcy relative, the wealthy and formidable Lady Catherine. Darcy arrives and surprises Elizabeth by joining her for a long intimate walk. However, he becomes angry when he learns that Darcy advised Bingley not to marry Jane. Unknowingly, Darcy announces his love for her and proposes. Elizabeth rejects his proposal, accusing him of ruining Jane's marriage and hosting Wickham. In his letter, Darcy explained that he interfered because he felt that Jane did not really love Bingley. Wickham, he wrote, was a lawyer and a crook. Elizabeth begins to feel she has misjudged Darcy and might be recklessly rejecting him. Returning home, Elizabeth finds that Lydia has fallen in love with Wickham. He urged his father to intervene, but he chose to do nothing. Elizabeth soon accompanied the Jardiners on their way. During the trip, Elizabeth visits Pemberley, Darcy's stately estate. She fantasizes about being his wife there, and his father is impressed when he suddenly appears and introduces her to his charming sister, Georgina. Bingley also arrives and reveals that he is still in love with Jane. Elizabeth's trip is cut short by a letter from Jane announcing that Lydia has left with Wickham. Word about a scandal that will ruin the future of all the princes. The Bennet search for Lydia in London. When Mr. Gardiner tracks them down, Wickham demands that the debt be repaid in exchange for marrying Lydia. Bennet assumed that Gardiner gave in to the demands as Lydia and Wickham soon returned, posing as the happy newlyweds. Elizabeth soon learns that it was Darcy, not Gardiner, who paid off Wickham's debt out of love for him. Bingley and Darcy return to Netherfield, and Bingley finally proposes to an overjoyed Jane. While Darcy is away in London on business, Lady Catherine visits Elizabeth, urging her not to marry Darcy. Elizabeth refuses the promise. Upon his return, Darcy asks Elizabeth again to marry him. This time she accepts, telling him that prejudice against her has made her blood blind. Darcy admits that his pride made him act violently. The two couples marry and the Bennets rejoice over their daughter's happiness.
The next is symbols. Symbols in Pride and Prejudice. Here's a list of the major symbols in Pride and Prejudice. Number one is dancing. This is symbol that comes into the story early on. In the beginning of the novel, while Jane is at her most prejudiced and Mr. Darcy at his most prideful, Jane and Mr. Darcy dance together in a stylistically formal and precise manner that mirrors their relationship at that point. Neither character likes the other very much, but there seems to be some level of attraction between them. Their encounters are awkward and overly formal at this point. Later, in the story, Elizabeth dances with Mr. Collins and finds the dance to be embarrassing and clumsy, which reflects how she sees Mr. Collins as a person. Number two is outer settings. The interaction that Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy have with each other tend to change depending on whether they are indoors or outdoors. Much of their most strained interaction takes place while they are confined in the building. They, they generally tend to behave much more wickedly, keeping a careful distance from each other. However, when they interact outdoor, they take a few meaningful walks together at the different points of novel. Their wicked behavior relaxes as they find themselves less beholden by expectation. They loosen up and are able to have more emotionally free conversation alone in the outdoors. And the third is imagery Pemberley. This is Mr. Darcy's estate, which Elizabeth visits at the point in the novel during which she is starting to stop. Thanks to traveling and being away from the pressures of her mother and her hometown's social expectation. The reader starts to get the sense at this point in the novel about how that Elizabeth feels free and more relaxed while she is traveling. Kimberly served as a symbol for the person Mr. Darcy really is underneath his pride and social status. Elizabeth is enchanted by the beauty of the property and subsequently starts to see Mr. Darcy in a new light and allow herself to feel charmed by him as well. To enchant this bride as approach his son. To enchant his symbol, Austen has Elizabeth cross a small bridge as she approached his son. This suggests that the divide that has so far existed between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth will be branched as well as the two become close to each other. As Elizabeth starts to see Mr. Darcy for who he really is, he starts to see Elizabeth for who she is when she is free or of social pressure and expectation. And the next is analysis. The work which Austen, initially titled First Impression, is the second of four novels that Austen published during her lifetime. Although Pride and Prejudice has been criticized for its lack of historical context, it is likely set either during the French Revolution or the Napoleonic Wars. The existence of its characters in a social bubble that is rarely penetrated by even beyond it is an accurate portrayal of the enclosed social world in which Austen lived. She depicted that world in all its own narrow pride and prejudice, with answering accuracy and satire. At the same time, she plays at its center at, as both its prime actor and most respected critic, and character so well conceived and rendered that the reader cannot but be gripped by her story and wish for its happy development. In the end, Austen's novel has remained popular largely because of Elizabeth, who was reportedly Austen's own favorite among all her heroines, and because of the enduring appeal to men and women alike of a well-thought and potentially happily ending love story. And the last conclusion, Bingley and Jane are in happy marriage. Darcy and Elizabeth are in happy marriage. Wickham and Lydia marriage falls apart and become broke. Two unmarried sisters are doing okay. Jane moves to an estate by Pemberley, and happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her two most divorcing daughter. Okay, this is the end of presentation. Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.